What's up, everybody?
Welcome back to Mile Higher Podcast, episode 232. Today, we are going to be talking about another UFO incident, specifically the Westall UFO incident. And this is very similar to the aerial school phenomenon that we just recently covered.
Because it has to deal with school children that had an encounter with several UFOs. But what's interesting about this one is this is actually Australia's largest or biggest mass UFO sighting in history.
Yep. And when we were in Australia, we did a
Down under.
tour of Phillip Island in Melbourne. And our tour guide, we ended up telling him we do podcasts. And this
Shout out Paul.
Paul.
Maybe he's a listener. I don't know.
Dude, he was awesome. He said he was going to start listening. Maybe he did.
Yeah, we were like talking
This was
conspiracies
early
and
days,
stuff.
right?
Yeah.
Like, what, 2017, 2018 maybe that we went?
Yeah, God, it's been a while.
I can't believe we haven't covered it until now. Because he told us about it and said it would be a great topic for you guys to look into. And we always have had it on our list, but we never actually got around to covering it.
Well, I covered it on my YouTube channel once upon a time.
Josh will do it.
We'll link it below.
Hell no. I watched it last night and I nearly died. I was oh boy.
Can people even find it anymore?
No, it's private right now on my channel. So
you embarrassed?
Don't try to go look for it. But
I'm sure it was good.
No, it was good. I just was like,
oh yeah.
I looked like I was like seriously, I was like looking at the camera and my eyes would not stop blinking. I was like,
dude, part of the reason that Josh had to end his YouTube channel was because it was so hard for him to film with all the bright lighting.
We have lighting
really close
here.
to you, but it's further away, like versus a ring light that's right in front.
Right in front, like the camera, because you sit so close to the camera in that setting that like I was staring right into it. I'm like,
Josh is so sensitive
I looked
to
like
light.
I was tweaking.
Like half of our wedding photos were no good because it was too bright out for him to keep his eyes open.
Yeah,
Amazing.
even this is like kind of bright. We have like lights around us, and
but they're more on the warmer side versus our like
the
green
white
lights
light.
at home. The white is more
Yeah, I can't stand white lights.
Yeah, I definitely like if I close my eyes right now, I can just see a bunch of lights in my head. Anyway, this is a very, very interesting story here, you guys, and one that I 100% believe really happened.
No doubt.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's some other theories out there, but based on the testimonies of all the people that witnessed, you know, what they saw that day. And not only did they see something, but this thing landed or came close to landing right in front of them. And based on the descriptions of this, there's just absolutely no doubt in my mind that what they saw was something extraordinary and something that to this day has not been explained away or debunked in any sort of way. It's, you know, there's other theories of what it could be because of course there's always theories of, you know, when we talk UFOs, you're talking about an unidentified flying object. So an unidentified flying object could have an identity and maybe we don't know what it is. We don't know the name for it yet. But in this case, based on the descriptions and what they saw these objects do, it definitely has so many similarities to other similar sightings and incidents. Not only the aerial school, but we're talking Betty Barney Hill. We're talking the Wendlesham Forest incident. I hope I'm saying that right. I think I am.
Yeah, that sounded kind of shaky. I'm not sure.
Rendlesham Forest. It's in the UK. Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing that. But there's so many other incidents that have happened around the world with similar objects being seen. And by objects, I'm talking about flying saucer. And that is what these students saw. And what's interesting and different about this from the aerial school incident is the fact that the students were older. So 11 to 16, we're talking high school age kids that had this encounter. So
yeah, and many of them still talk about it publicly as adults.
Well, for many years they were like suppressed because they were trying and that's the fishy thing about this is that there was clearly a cover up that happened in order to make this go away and keep it under wraps. And it was years and years later that the students actually felt comfortable enough to come forward and start talking about this in great detail and going to the media outlets and things like that, sharing their stories. And it's honestly crazy.
It is.
What they saw that day and the subsequent events that happened with the military and the government when this event happened.
Mm-hmm.
So
and again, it's one of those, sightings where there's so many people who have seen it. Just the sheer number of witnesses makes it hard to believe that they would all make it up,
right.
Or
and people are like, oh, mass hysteria. I'm like,
oh God, mass hysteria is the dumbest excuse for anything ever. It's so stupid. Anyway,
I'm like, let's look at some
just...
actual events of mass hysteria, and then we'll compare. But
yeah, maybe we should do an episode sometime on just actual mass hysteria events. We can understand it a little bit better.
Sure, maybe. We'll see.
Could be fun. Okay, let's get into this. But before we do, we'd like to thank our sponsors for the day: Apostrophe, Rocket Money, Simply Safe, Native, and Shopify. Thank you. Also, just a reminder, you guys, you still have time to make a donation to our NECMEC charity campaign.
Yeah,
collab.
campaign.
I never know what to call it exactly, but we are currently raising funds for National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and we are matching all donations that you guys make to our team page between now and the end of the year. We have a goal of $100,000 by the end of the year. We are inching our way there. I believe we're at about 80,000 right now when we're recording, and hopefully that goes up. So yeah, if you are looking to give back during the holiday season, now is the time, folks, because you can double your donation. Great way to give back. And NECMEC is an awesome place to give back to. They just do so much. They are incredible. We talk about them all the time in our episodes across all of our different platforms, and their team is just amazing, and very grateful for all the donations that have come in so far. So thank you to everyone who has participated in this campaign this year.
Because every child deserves a safe childhood.
That's right.
That's the mission.
That's right. And
I love it.
And they really, help work towards that goal in many different ways. There's
no greater cause, in my opinion, and responsibility than to protect children. I think that's so important.
Yeah.
The youth, and just especially those that are in positions where they can be exploited or taken advantage of. So it's a very, very important cause. And, thank you to everybody out there who has already donated. I mean, we have our top 10 donors right here: Megan, Lori, John, Dean, Victoria, Trent, Kelly, Julia, Jennifer, and Bob.
Thank you guys.
Thank you guys so much for donating to the cause.
Yeah, some really big donations have come in, and I know NECMEC was kind of blown away seeing some of those. Just again, thank you all so much.
And we'll be making, like you said, another donation from Mile High Media, our company, towards
Before
the campaign
the
once we add up all the donations that
once we math the math out.
Once we math it out, right? So
we're
definitely
gonna
make
hit
a huge
100
impact.
grand or more, no problem. I think
that's awesome.
Yeah,
it's always
really
good to give
exciting.
back.
Of course. Anyway, you ready to get into this here?
Yeah, let's dive in and go down under.
Down under. That's right.
Melbourne. It's not Melbourne. Don't say Melbourne.
I know. I remember when we first got down there, we were like, Melbourne.
We're in Melbourne, Australia.
Well, there is a Melbourne, Florida. And
right.
It's said you don't
it's
call it Melbourne.
The same, yeah.
It looks, how do they get Melbourne out of Melbourne, though?
Dude, how do we get half the words that in the English language out of?
True.
You know what I mean? Like,
but OURNE turns into bin?
Who knows?
Explain, if you're an Australian and you know
Aussie,
why that is.
Explain to us.
I'd love to know.
Why do you say it like this?
Yeah.
When it's spelled out in a way. I think it's the vowels are different.
Yeah, they are.
The way that they say the vowels are a bit different. Because it's not just Melbourne, it's like Cairns, like we thought it was Cairns.
I thought it's cans.
It's cans, yeah. It's cans.
Yeah, Cairns. What are you talking about?
Fried
cans. Janelle knows and she didn't even go. We did.
Cane. I'm thinking raisin canes.
Yeah, so what is this? Fried chicken.
Yeah, but that's spelled with an R, and then but it's like pronounced cans. Yeah, some interesting pronunciations.
Yeah. But anyway, that's where we're going to down under to visit the Westall Secondary College, which is a high school there, where this all happens back in 1966.
Yep, in Clayton South, which is a suburb of Melbourne in Victoria, Australia. Clayton South is unofficially known as Westall, but back in 1966, the school was known as Westall High School. The headmaster of the school at the time was a man named Frank Sambleby, and he was a pretty black and white, thinking by the books kind of guy. And he was also a pretty big skeptic and a very judgmental man. Frank had a hard time accepting things that he didn't understand, and anything that didn't fit into his view of right and wrong, or anything that interrupted the smooth flow of things, gave him a lot of trouble. The school had 485 students aged 11 to 16, and there were also many young teachers at Westall as well. And some of those teachers didn't get along well with the headmaster. It was his first year at the school, and he ran a tight ship. It was the 60s, so there was a lot of change to be pissed about if you were an uptight traditionalist. So it wasn't a great time for him. And on April 6th, 1966, the students at Westall High were gearing up for their Easter break. The next day, April 7th, would be the last day of term 1. And after many long months of studying, the students were obviously anxious to finish their classes and start to enjoy their break. So around 11 a.m. on the 6th, the students at Westall High School were just going about their day as they usually did. They listened to lectures in their classrooms, relaxed during their lunch break, and played sports outside during PE.
Did you know that property crimes like burglaries and package theft spike over the winter? That's why now is the best time to secure your home and stop the theft with award-winning home security. Simply Safe is the home security system I recommend to everybody. Make it your resolution to start the new year with a greater peace of mind and safety for you and your family. Here's why I love it. Simply Safe is very, very affordable, and anybody can install this system, which is absolutely amazing. You don't have to schedule a technician. You don't have to pay for installation. All of the window sensors and door sensors have basically a little sticky tape on the back of it, and you can attach it to wherever you need to. Super easy. The cameras set up flawlessly with the app. And I got to say, I've used several different security systems in my day, and Simply Safe has by far the most intuitive and easy to use app. Their outdoor cameras are also high quality, high resolution, and they work great as a pet camera as well. It's no wonder that Simply Safe was named the best home security system of 2022 by US News & World Report for a third year in a row. You can customize it for homes of all sizes, including apartments, which is great. In addition to the HD security cameras, both inside and out, and the advanced sensors for every room and window and door, they also have hazard sensors for detecting fires, floods, and other threats to your home. But best of all, the 24/7 professional monitoring service costs under $1 a day, which is less than half the price of ADT's traditional professionally installed system. Get Simply Safe. With the top-rated Simply Safe app, you can stay in complete control of your system anytime, anywhere. You can arm or disarm, unlock for a guest, access your cameras, or adjust system settings. Maybe you're away on a trip or just away from home and be able to check on your home at any time through the app. Customize the perfect system for your home in just a few minutes at simplysafe.com/milehigher. Go today and claim a free indoor security camera plus 20% off your order with interactive monitoring. That's simplysafe.com/milehigher. There's no safe like Simply Safe.
It was a sunny, breezy day in the suburbs of Melbourne. 2 groups of students were out for PE on the Oval, which was their school's big sporting field. Some of those students were friends Terry Peck, Marilyn Eastwood, Jackie Argent, and their friend Tanya. Suddenly, Tanya looked up and saw something in the sky. It looked like something that she had never seen before. She started screaming that it was a flying saucer. Terry just could not believe her ears. When she looked up, she saw it. It really was a flying saucer. In fact, she saw 3 UFOs. And from there, a commotion started brewing on the Oval. Tanya ran inside the school, shrieking that there was flying saucers outside. And meanwhile, a Westall High science teacher named Andrew Greenwood was inside teaching a classroom full of kids. And all of a sudden, a random student burst into his classroom and started shouting that there was a flying saucer landing outside. Can you imagine being in your class and a student comes in and
I
says
wish
something like
every
that?
day that somebody would come running inside saying,
God damn, I
Josh,
agree.
come outside right now. There's a flying saucer.
I'm going to do that too in a few months and just see how you're
That'd be fun.
Coming
little...
from you, I will never believe it, unfortunately.
Why would you ever? I never joke about anything.
Oh.
I am the most serious.
Oh, yeah.
No. Janelle's the prankster.
Yeah, I'm sure.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
And the student that came in and said this was hysterical. Some witnesses said she was a girl, but some said that the student was a boy. So it's just one of those things we're not really sure. But of course, many students ran to the window to see what all the commotion was about. Meanwhile, students in the other classrooms had noticed the odd flying objects outside their windows. Mr. Greenwood tried to calm down his students and keep them from running out of the room. He thought that the student who ran in was just having some sort of episode, so he didn't believe them at first. He told all his students to sit back down. And other witnesses say that Mr. Greenwood decided that he and the whole class would go see for themselves. But either way, the bell rang a few minutes later, so class was dismissed anyway. So the students ran out of the classroom to take a look. Even Mr. Greenwood couldn't help his curiosity, and he followed the students out the door. 2 of those students were Joy, Ty, and Sue Maynard. And when they got outside, they saw something incredible. Andrew said he saw a gray saucer or a cigar-shaped object floating in the sky, and it looked to be about once or twice the size of a car. But Sue and Joy said that they saw 3 objects, a large oval-shaped craft and 2 smaller ones in the traditional, flying saucer shape. These smaller crafts looked like escorts along with it. So a crowd started forming quickly on the oval, and Tanya saw that one of the chemistry teachers, Barbara Robbins, grabbed a camera from the office and started snapping photos of the scene. Now, the craft was huge. It flew very low over the oval, lower than a helicopter would fly, and some students said that the craft was 50 feet off the ground. The craft was metallic, made out of metal, and it caught the sun as it flew by. Some people thought the craft looked gray or white. Other witnesses described it as a greenish silver color with a slight purple hint.
So I just want to say a couple things. First of all, when you're seeing a dish-shaped craft in the sky, depending on the angle that you're viewing it at, it can look like a cigar shape, depending on what angle it's at.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I wanted to do was I wanted to play this clip from Bob Lazar. Reason
Bobby.
why I'm bringing Bob Lazar into this is because Bob Lazar came forward in 1989 as a whistleblower, basically claiming that he worked at a base called S4, which is a part of the Area 51 facility out in Nevada.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually worked on a craft that was recovered.
Yeah.
That is a flying saucer. And he calls it the sport model. And I think hearing him, whether or not you believe him, that's up to you. But
who doesn't believe Bob?
Listen to what Bob says about just the immense detail that he describes a sport model in, and how similar his description of this flying saucer is to what the actual children saw that day. Let's play it.
What did it feel like to walk inside a flying saucer?
It was really more ominous than interesting at the time. And everything is exactly one color. It's all a dark pewter gray. There is no sharp angle anywhere. Everything has a radius of curvature to it, as if somebody built this thing out of wax and then let it melt a little bit and then let it cool off. It's a very unusual, it feels unusual just to be in there, but even the most simple things inside are, and pardon the pun, are completely alien. The little doors that snap open are made of little hexagons. It's hard to go through everything that pops into my mind right now, but it's difficult really to say. But there's nothing that, it's like going into a room where nothing looks familiar at all, not even the room itself. So it was really something I'll never forget.
So again, when he had this experience, we're talking the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what he was seeing. And just based on the description that he gave of the sport model, which if you look at a picture of the sport model that he's sketched for us, and
kind of the
it's
classic.
it's the flying saucer. And so he was tasked with back engineering the technology of this craft. And so it makes you wonder, how long these craft have been in the earth, flying around the earth, who's flying them around, and, what purpose do they have? And I think that's the key question here is like, who's actually piloting these craft? If there's anything or anyone piloting them? Because I think a lot of people, especially skeptics, are like, there's, you think it's aliens they're flying around in these things. And could it be? Sure. It could be extraterrestrials. It could be life from elsewhere, or it could also be technology that has been back engineered from recovered craft that we've gotten. I always go back to Roswell because Roswell's kind of, that pinnacle event where everything started within ufology and the alleged recovery that we did of downed craft, which were these saucers. So is it possible that this is some type of experimental technology that the children observed that day? Potentially. There's also a possibility that it was life from elsewhere that was perhaps swinging by the school that day. But we'll dive into that a little bit more here in a little bit. Let's get back to what the children saw. So Joy and Sue watched as the two smaller crafts turned on their sides at a 45-degree angle and shot off straight up into the sky. The larger craft made a rapid descent and disappeared behind some pine trees. The girls believed that the crafts were scared off by some small planes that had appeared. One former student named Victor said that he'd actually seen two crafts land near the school. Some kids were hanging onto a fence separating the school's land from a grassy paddock, and they were watching the scene unfold because just back behind the school, there's this kind of foresty, grassy area called the Grange.
Which is where they would run.
Right. There's just like a big open area. Type stuff. And that's where these two circular crafts landed in this grassy area, a few meters from each other. He said they were silver saucers that looked like they were made of smooth metal with no seams or joints. What do we just hear Bob Lazar say? It's just smooth metal all the way around. There's no joints. There's no seams, which is very, very difficult to do with even modern technology.
Difficult for us.
Right. Teachers told the kids to get off the fence, but of course they didn't listen. Here's a clip of Terry actually describing what the crafts looked like.
Terry, we've seen drawings that look like a flying saucer and even two flying saucers. Can you describe for us what was there?
Yes, it was about 1.5 times the size of a normal family sedan, and it was round, silver coloured. There were all lights around the bottom of it, no windows. It threw off a bit of a heat, and it was making a low buzzing sound.
Did any of you at all witness anyone inside these unidentified flying objects? Did you see anyone?
No.
No.
So that was obviously an interview from years and years later when they're finally coming out on public television to talk about what they saw. So again, with what you just heard, it lines up almost exactly with the description that Bob has given, as well as even the size, which in that clip that we played, Bob doesn't describe the actual size, but the actual size of the craft itself is very similar. And so you have to start thinking that what Bob was working on and what Bob interacted with could in fact be similar or the same UFOs that they observed that day. Some of the kids actually climbed over the fence and got close enough to touch the craft. Victor said he reached his hand out and could feel that it was very hot. It was radiating heat from over a meter away. Then after sitting there for a while, the craft slowly started to lift off the ground. There were some small planes heading for them. Some people think that the craft sensed that, there's potential danger coming in. There's these planes approaching. So it was time to take off and leave. The craft then hovered up into the air about 50 feet and then quickly took off the Grange Preserve, which, like I said, is that wooded area behind the school. Some of the students immediately hopped the fence and began chasing it. This included Jackie, Marilyn, Tanya, Joy, and Sue. This Grange area where the craft had landed was a special place. It was kind of a hideaway for students. You go out there and hang out and smoke without being seen by the school faculty. So all the girls took off running towards the Grange. Tanya had managed to run faster than the other girls, so they lost sight of her. The other students were faster than Terry, so she was falling behind, but when she caught up with them, some of the girls started passing out. Tanya headed towards a grassy clearing, and she figured that the UFO would land in that spot, so she wanted to get a better look. When Joy and the other girls arrived at the clearing in the Grange, they saw the large craft shoot up into the sky, and then it turned on its side and sped off out of sight. Once the students at the Grange saw the craft lift off again, they stopped chasing it. The girls hadn't seen the craft land, but Joy said it left behind a huge circle of flattened grass that swirled in an anti-clockwise direction. When Terry finally caught up to the landing spot, she saw a big yellow circular patch of grass. It looked almost like it had been burnt, but at the very least, the grass looked flattened in a swirl pattern. So it was clear that something likely had landed on it. So again, go back to the REL school incident, as well as countless others. When these craft land or come close to the ground, I don't know that they actually physically land on the ground, but the energy that they put off lays the grass down. And what's interesting is, what is that like?
Like many different stories that we've seen, obviously.
Crop circles.
Crop circles to other UFO sightings as well.
Where the grass is laid down in a pattern like that, which is very interesting. And
or looks kind of burnt.
Right.
Or discolored.
And just the manner that it does it in is in a way that I don't think there's any other type of object or piece of machinery that we have that could make sort of that type of indentation in the way that it actually was observed, which is very interesting. So after the craft lifted off again, it ended up being pursued by 5 small aircrafts about the size of Cessnas. Meanwhile, back at the school, witnesses watched while the object started playing sort of a cat and mouse game with the planes. The craft itself now appeared to be like a streak of bright light. The aircrafts looked like they were doing their best to approach the UFO, and Mr. Greenwood said it was the most amazing flying he'd ever seen in his life. The craft had first been followed by 1 airplane, but after it lifted off from the Grange, 4 more planes began to follow it. But every time the aircraft moved too close, the UFO would accelerate a little bit, speed up, and then stop once it had moved away from the plane. So it's basically just kind of like, you can kind of imagine this sight in your head of like, you know, there's these bunch of these little planes in the air all trying to track this thing. And this craft, this UFO is just kind of like is just kind of darting in and out of different areas, but it's maneuvering in a way that these planes cannot. And that's key. The movement that's being observed by the craft is very important when talking about theories of what this could be, because it just doesn't match up. The behavior of what was observed just doesn't line up with any other potential theory or solution to what this thing is.
You guys all know at this point that I am a huge fan of Native, and I have been using their products now for over 4 years. And their thoughtful formulation behind all of their products is something that I've always loved. They understand that it's not just what's on the inside that counts, but also the outside. That's why Native is releasing their deodorant that I know and love in a new, improved, plastic-free packaging. And we love that. Native is doing their part to help our Earth with their new 100% plastic-free and recyclable packaging. When you buy Native's new plastic-free recyclable packaged deodorant, you are saving 37 grams of plastic. Native is also a proud partner of 1% for the planet and are committing 1% of their plastic-free deodorant sales to environmental nonprofits. Just like all of Native's other deodorants, their plastic-free deodorant is aluminum and paraben-free. It kills odor-causing bacteria and has 24-hour odor protection to keep you feeling and smelling fresh. And with Native, you can choose from 10 scents, including their classic coconut and vanilla. And they also have sensitive formulas that are formulated without baking soda and even unscented. So really something for everyone. I am such a Native fan. Like I said, it's the only deodorant that I have been using the past couple of years. And I truly recommend it to everyone I know. So if you are ready to try plastic-free deodorant, go to native.com/milehigher20 and use promo code milehigher20 at checkout to get 20% off your first order. That's nativedeo.com/milehigher20 or use promo code milehigher20 at checkout for 20% off your first order.
Mr. Greenwood had looked away from the sky for a few moments, but when he turned around again, the craft and the 5 airplanes had all disappeared. Again, about 200 to 350 people witnessed the UFO, and the sighting lasted about 20 minutes. After those 20 minutes, the headmaster came outside and ordered everyone get back inside. A farmer working nearby at the school at a market garden named Paul Smith saw the craft that day. He stopped to stare at it when a group of students hopped the fence onto the property to chase it. Paul thought the sighting was some sort of film projected into the sky because it was just so unbelievable that he didn't think it was real. About 20 minutes after the craft disappeared, Paul said some tan camouflaged colored trucks and a couple of Jeeps pulled up to the scene. 20 or so men dressed in khaki colored uniforms got out, and Paul believed that these were people from the army. But a local man and his younger sister saw something different in the field that day. He said that they saw 2 army trucks, 2 men in camouflage, and 2 men in blue uniforms, and it looked like one of the soldiers was using a metal minesweeper to check the area. At one point, the men kicked violently at the ground, and then they returned to their trucks and everyone left. According to the witness, those army men couldn't have been Australian, because at the time, neither the Australian or British Army wore camouflage uniforms. Only U.S. Army soldiers did. Meanwhile, Jackie, Tanya, and the other students watched the craft leave the Grange, and then they returned back to the school. When they got back, there were already ambulances waiting there. And Tanya started freaking out and quote unquote fell to pieces. And that's when one of the ambulances took Tanya away. And after that, none of her fellow classmates ever saw her again. Jackie thinks that Tanya saw the craft itself while they were at the Grange. What's interesting is that only 20 to 30 minutes after the event, government men in plain business suits showed up to the school, and the men instructed all of the witnesses to keep quiet about what they had seen and not tell anyone about it.
Mm-hmm.
They also guarded the site where the craft landed, and none of the men identified who they were working for. So we're literally talking about like Men in Black situation. We're talking about people who clearly are some top secret government department that have now showed up to the school. So that right there lends a lot of credibility to whatever this thing was so important and crucial for them to cover up that they sent all of these government and military personnel after the sighting was over. Headmaster Sambleby held a special assembly that day, and he told the students that, quote unquote, he didn't want to hear any more about this nonsense. He claimed the object was just a weather balloon. Frank told the teachers to tell the students that what they saw didn't exist.
Interesting. Yet you bring all these important people dressed in suits and, telling them don't talk about it. But it's just a weather balloon.
Yeah. Funny how that works.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense because weather balloons can be launched by anybody. News stations, colleges, which maybe in the 60s it was different and, it wasn't so readily available. But these days, almost anybody can get their hands on a weather balloon.
Yeah. Weather balloon is just like the classic excuse.
Which we'll talk more about the weather balloon theory at the end because, there's a little bit more to it. But the headmaster informed everyone that any student caught speaking about the incident would be severely punished, and any staff member who spoke about it would be fired. That is serious. He instructed all of them to never discuss the incident again. So many of them didn't. That day, one teacher spotted a confrontation between the headmaster and chemistry teacher Barbara Robbins and a man he'd never seen before. The man was dressed in what looked like a police uniform. Barbara had actually been snapping photos of the event. The headmaster and the man demanded that not only she hand over the roll of film, but the entire camera itself. And God, I wish we had access to those photos because I guarantee those photos have concrete proof of what they saw that day, or at least something. Obviously, this is probably not an HD DSLR camera, but still any proof. And that's what's hard about this incident is that there are no photos. There's no physical visual evidence to look at with this because the only visual evidence potentially there was confiscated. But by the end of the day, the police had arrived and news media outlets had shown up. The students had been told not to speak to the media on school grounds, but once school let out, the students figured nobody would stop them from talking to reporters. So these reporters started interviewing the students about what they had seen that day. And one of those students was Joy Ty, who was interviewed by 9 News. But during the interview, either a school rep or the headmaster came out and told everyone to go home. The police officers also stopped the other interviews. They told the students to go back inside and demanded that the crews stop filming. Marilyn Eastwood even got detention for talking to the news outlets that day. And when part of her interview was printed in the paper later, she got detention again. So they're very serious about not talking.
So the next day, an article in the Melbourne newspaper called The Age wrote that the UFO sighting might have been a weather balloon. The Weather Bureau had apparently launched a balloon around 8:30 a.m. that day from the town of Laverton.
Which, before we get further into this, I wanted to just play a clip of a freaking weather balloon so you can see what, if you've never seen what one looks like.
Let's take a look.
And tell me this.
It was not a UFO in the skies over Tucson. It was the second launch from Tucson of Worldview's Stratolite system. Worldview says it's flying a government payload. Unlike a normal balloon that goes just where the wind takes it, Stratolites can stay in a controlled area. Because the wind blows different directions at different altitudes, the Stratolite varies its altitude to fly in winds that push it one way, then another to keep the balloon and payload in the area the mission requires.
Like if you saw that thing, you would say that that's a weather balloon. There'd be no question in your mind.
About
it's a clear
that look like a flying saucer?
No.
Is there any way that could be confused with a flying saucer?
No.
Does that thing look like it could land?
No.
Or come 50 feet or go 50 feet off the ground, turn on its side, and then accelerate off into the distance? And why on earth would they send 5 airplanes out to chase this thing if it was a balloon?
No, it's honestly
makes absolutely
ridiculous.
no sense.
But I think a lot of people, haven't seen a weather balloon, so they don't really know what the difference is, and they think, oh, maybe people were just confused.
Well, there's another clip I have in here later on that's a view from the ground looking at it up in the sky, which if you're looking at a weather balloon way up there in the sky, obviously it can look like, something like, I guess you could kind of confuse it maybe with a saucer potentially, but it still doesn't look like anything what these children described they saw that day.
But anyway, the Weather Bureau had said that they had launched this weather balloon at 8:30 a.m. from Laverton, which is about 32 kilometers west of Westall. And due to westerly winds, got a lot of west going on here, in the area at the time, the balloon could have been blown towards the school. The age also added that no private, commercial, or RAAF, which is Royal Australian Air Force planes, had noted anything unusual in the area at the time.
Which could be because A, they either didn't detect this thing, or B, they did and they're just lying and they're just trying to cover it up because they don't want to admit that something unidentified entered their airspace. I mean, because that's a potential security risk. So they'd be, might upset people.
So the next day, Jackie Argent was called down to the headmaster's office, and she was greeted by Frank and two very well-dressed men in suits. She wasn't introduced to the men, but now she believes they were from the Australian government.
Literally the men in black.
Kind of, maybe. Only one of the men spoke, and he started asking Jackie rapid-fire questions about what she saw outside that day. And Jackie started to try to explain, but then these men started asking her mocking questions like, oh, we suppose you think you saw a flying saucer? And we suppose you saw little green men? And these questions made Jackie feel angry. Obviously she felt like they were kind of poking fun at her. She tried to explain to the men that she had never seen any of that. She'd only said that she had seen this object in the sky. After she left the conference room, Jackie was so upset by the meeting that she burst into tears. Jackie tried to visit Tanya the next day and check up on her, but when she knocked on her door, something really weird happened.
Can I ask what happened to the girl? You took her back to the school, the one that was hysterical. Is it Tanya? And she went into the hospital, and then you went to visit her at her place, and they said she didn't live there.
Yes, right. I went to her house the following day, and an English-speaking woman opened the door and said there had never been a Tanya living there. Now, the problem with that is that Tanya's parents didn't speak English to start with. I think they were Yugoslavian. So I'd been to this house a lot of times and then was told, no, sorry, you're mistaken.
Oh, my God. That's
so what's happened to her? Do you know if she disappeared? Have you had any contact with her? Do you know where she is and what happened?
I have had no personal contact with her. I know one of the researchers has. She prefers to stay anonymous and not be involved in anything at all. She told the researcher that she had no recall of what had happened. And then there was a very odd story about her parents putting her in a convent for some reason that was, to me, totally ridiculous. That's it.
I love how she ends that. That's it.
Yeah, it's interesting because we have additional details about what happened to Tanya that we'll go over later on in this story. But it's interesting. What I'm gathering is that this UFO affected her physically in some way, and that
could be
some type of whatever energy this thing's giving off. Potentially, she had a reaction to it because she just basically went nuts after getting so close to it, and then she was taken off in an ambulance. So perhaps they were worried about the effects that this UFO had to her, and they were going to go study her or something like that. Or, obviously they want to make sure she's okay as well. But it's interesting how she was whisked away so quickly, and none of them were told
very sus
about what happened to her. But more on her later.
Yes. And also when one student brought his friends to the Grange to show them the flattened grass in the area where the UFO landed, he discovered that the site had been dug up. More students tried to return to that spot in the Grange after the incident. And on April 7th, some students tried to cross the paddock, but they were stopped and turned away by Air Force officials. So sketchy. And one of the students said that there were trucks on the paddock field and that there were men using devices that looked like Geiger counters. And a reminder, a Geiger counter is an electronic tool used for detecting and measuring ionizing radiation. So about a week later, the students went back to try to get another look. All the tall grass in the paddock had been cut, which was highly unusual. And when they tried to check the area where the circles were, they found that those areas had been burnt. Andrew Greenwood, the science teacher at Westall, said that he was silenced by the government and school officials. And one night, 2 weeks after the incident, 2 government officials showed up at his house and asked him what he saw. And one of the men was in just plain clothes, but the other was a senior Air Force official. And they told Mr. Greenwood that he hadn't seen anything and suggested that he was drunk at the time.
So offensive.
Yeah,
what a horrible thing to say.
Don't
Plus,
you
when you're
think you were
drunk, I
drunk?
don't see shit. The fuck? I've been wasted before. We all have it.
I know.
Did you randomly see a UFO?
No, I wish I would have.
It's like ridiculous.
But they said if he went public about what he saw, they'd report him to the school board and he would lose his job. They warned him that they'd tell everyone that he was an alcoholic and that he hadn't seen a UFO because UFOs don't exist, of course. They also threatened to prosecute him under the Official Secrets Act. And this act is basically a law against discussing state secrets related to national security or other areas of government. Here's a snippet of an interview where Mr. Greenwood talks about this visit. Take a listen.
It was a grey, almost cylindrical or cigar-shaped object. They told me that I was wrong, that I hadn't seen anything.
They were threatening you?
Oh, absolutely. I was threatened. Clearly you were drunk on duty, and that will have to be reported to the education department, and of course you'll lose your job. And that is what I find most interesting of all, that I was definitely being told to be quiet.
Scared into secrecy.
Mm-hmm.
That's by intimidation. That's exactly what they were doing. One of the things that we did this year was revamp our merch store. And the way that we did that was by switching it over to Shopify. I'm absolutely a huge fan of Shopify, always have been, and I'm so glad to be able to start using it again with our merch store. Shopify is the #1 best e-commerce platform out there. Shopify makes it simple to sell to anyone from anywhere, and you don't need a tech background to understand Shopify or even get an online store set up, which I think makes it better than all the other platforms out there. It really is super easy to set up. But what I like about it is not only is it easy to get the shop set up, get your products added to it, but it has all the features you need built right into Shopify to actually run your store from start to finish. You don't have to go out and get some third party to run your payment processing or shipping or anything like that. Shopify has it all built into one place. So it's truly a one-stop shop for all your e-commerce needs. Plus, Shopify covers all the sales channels to successfully grow your business, from an in-person POS system to an all-in-one e-commerce platform, even across social media platforms like TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram. And thanks to 24/7 support and free on-demand business courses, Shopify is here to help you succeed every step of the way. It's an amazing platform to start your shop on, but it's even better to grow it on. You can start from nothing and potentially do millions and millions of dollars in revenue and continue using Shopify. It grows with your business, which is amazing. You don't have to switch at any point. It's there for the lifetime of your store. So sign up for a free trial at shopify.com/milehigher, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/milehigher to start selling online today. That's shopify.com/milehigher. This is really interesting. It just popped into my head while we're recording that this year, there was a report released from the Pentagon from 2010 that talks about the psychological effects of UFO sightings based on a bunch of cases here. I'm looking for, so the 2010 report compiled 42 cases of adverse effects from medical files and 300 from unpublished cases. So what this says is that based on the study they did, people who just had UFO sightings suffered from serious ailments, including burns, paralysis, pain, rashes, and amnesia, including brain damage. So to me, based on this evidence and this data, it's possible that that's what happened with Tanya, maybe some of the other individuals as well, is that they suffered physical ailments as from just being in the presence of this object.
That definitely makes you think, is it for our protection that
Doubt it. They
UFOs
don't give a fuck about our health.
No, I mean aliens and
I see
whoever's
what you mean.
piloting the UFOs.
Is that the national
are they
security issue?
concerned for us? Is that
Gotcha.
why we don't see it as much? Is that why, they don't approach humans?
Maybe.
Maybe there's known, health concerns, or maybe it affects just certain beings, certain ones of us.
Well, that's what the Pentagon's basically saying in this report, is that the report describes alleged injuries to human observers by anomalous advanced aerospace systems, some of which may be a threat to United States interests. That's interesting. Other related to electromagnetic radiation.
Yeah.
So that's what's actually happening here with these craft, is that they're using this electromagnetic energy that's creating this radiation, which is leaving behind remnants on the ground, which is why the Geiger counters are brought in to measure that. And that's why oftentimes people that study crop circles go into these crop circles and they bring the Geiger counters in, and sure enough, there's
Picking up
levels
all types
of
shit.
radiation there.
Yep.
And what leaves behind that?
What do you think?
Right. So I don't know, man. It's crazy, because when you start putting the pieces together and you start looking at these things, and I mean, this isn't a report from the Pentagon that literally studied the effects of UFO sightings from all of these different cases. And there's so many similarities and connections that it's hard to ignore. How do you ignore that and just explain it away as a weather balloon?
So anyway, back to Mr. Greenwood. Since he was a first-year teacher, it was far too risky for him to speak out and potentially end his career so early on. I mean, he really didn't want to lose his job over this. So, Josh, if you were in this situation, would you still talk about what you saw, or would you keep it on the DL?
Well, it depends on the threat. I mean, I think losing your job is obviously a pretty serious threat, but losing your life is a lot bigger. And, as we've heard from other people, that's oftentimes the threat is, there's a bullet with your name on it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it depends on the threat, but ultimately I think for the greater good, and I think it's better to come forward. And I mean, the reason why we know so many secrets that the government has kept from us is because of whistleblowers.
Yeah.
And people that come forward and
Well, think about how many people have been threatened and have stayed silent. How much stuff we don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the scary thing, is how much do we still, don't know? How many secrets are still there? And there's loads and loads, I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely.
And how many people disappear, die from mysterious circumstances? I mean, the list goes on and on. So it's it's a tough decision. I think it just depends on your situation and what you have to lose, and you got to kind of calculate it from there. But yeah, it's tough.
But it's unfortunate because even, in current times, a lot of people who are deemed to be whistleblowers are then looked at as just crazy.
Liars,
Yeah, they're liars. And so I can understand.
Ridiculed.
Yeah. And then their whole, it's not just, oh, well, if Mr. Greenwood, didn't follow the rules or whatever and decided to keep talking about it, he gets fired. Okay, well, it's not like he can just go pick up another job, because now he's known as this lunatic teacher that is telling people about UFOs. Like, it's a really big consequence that these people have to face.
Possibly drunk on the job.
Right.
Yeah, good luck getting another teaching job with something like that. Also, this is really interesting. It turns out there were 2 other notable UFO sightings near Westall just days before the incident. The first one came out of Baldwin, which is a suburb of Melbourne, and it's about 15 kilometers northwest of Westall High. 4 days before Westall, on April 2nd, at 2:21 p.m., a witness in Baldwin was taking photos in his mother's garden when he saw something unusual. He saw a bright flash of light and a mysterious flying object in the sky, and he immediately raised his Polaroid camera and snapped a picture of it. After the object bounced, it shot away towards the north at a very high speed. It was like the object had been shot out of a gun. The object resembled descriptions of the UFO that witnesses at Westall gave. The craft was photographed from 17 kilometers away and had behaved in a very similar way. Multiple analyses were done on whether or not the photo had been manipulated using double exposure or anything like that, but the results on whether or not the photo was manipulated are mixed and inconclusive. 2 days before Westall, a man named Ron Sullivan was driving through Maryborough in central Victoria when he noticed an odd light display on the road in front of him. And when he drove up closer to the lights, he saw a UFO beaming light into the trees. Ron was understandably very scared, and he almost hit the tree while he tried to speed away. He didn't report the incident until 3 days later when he heard about a similar accident. A man had driven off that same road and fatally crashed into the same tree that Ron narrowly missed. A couple of men from the Air Force came to visit Ron after he reported this incident. They took a look at his car, and Ron asked the men to let him know if they found anything, but they never got back to him.
Possible.
These are connected to Westall?
I think it's possible for sure. I mean, based on that picture, it definitely looks a lot like what they described seeing.
Yeah.
So it's very possible. And I wish we had the photographs from Barbara's camera. Then it would we could legitimize these photos. Because obviously, I mean, photos are difficult and they can always be manipulated and things like that. But I don't know. These look pretty, it's interesting because it's like this guy's sitting on like a 45-degree angle, like they said. So yeah, I think it's very, very possible that what he saw was, in fact, maybe the exact same craft that came to the school that day.
So UFO researchers in the area have tried to investigate the Westall incident, but they didn't get very far. There's no information about the sighting in Australian government documents, and since so much time has passed, the witnesses were told to keep quiet, and it's been very hard to collect their stories. UFO researchers in the area tried to find out who was piloting these 5 airplanes, but nobody at the nearby Moorabbin Airport came forward. The only government file that pertains in some way to the Westall incident is a response letter from the Department of Air. The original sender wrote a long letter asking the Department of Defense about Westall, and the Department of Air responded in 1969. In their letter, they stated RAF, or the Royal Australian Air Force, does not investigate all unidentified aerial phenomenon reports. They did not mention Westall or anything about the incident at all.
UFO researchers have been trying for decades to get a hold of this official report on the incident. I mean, remember, there was so many government agencies there. There was military there it just seems very unbelievable that with all of these resources sent out to investigate this incident, that there's not a shred of paperwork that was ever filled out about what was investigated and what they actually collected evidence-wise. It just seems laughable to me that there's nothing, or they claim that there's nothing. That's the key. It's like they're claiming that there's nothing. According to his family, a senior officer of the former Australian government Department of Supply wrote an official report on Westall. But this report has never been found, and it's also never been confirmed that this report was even written in the first place. But apparently the stress over the incident was so great that it possibly contributed to his declining health. The man has since passed away and his identity is still a mystery. But it took 16 years for UFO researchers to get a hold of Air Force documents on unidentified aerial phenomenon from those relevant years. The Ron Sullivan incident, Baldwin photo, and Westall incident were apparently investigated. However, none of these researchers could find any Air Force documents on these incidents at all, which it's very possible that this goes back to like Black Ops projects, where within the Air Force, there's a compartmentalized office that nobody even knows about. The heads of the Air Force probably don't even know about that actually were the ones that's why I said Men in Black, is because there are these groups, even the ones in the Air Force don't know they even exist. And they're the ones actually investigating these incidents, which documents about Australian military work during the time could still be highly classified, maybe even destroyed, or in the hands of other allied powers. So maybe the information was shared with the U.S. and the U.S. is the ones that hold the files for this particular incident, which is possible. But later in 1966, Andrew Greenwood spoke to a friend about the incident, and that friend then made an audio tape describing their conversation. He sent the tape to an American physicist named James E. McDonald. And just for some background, at the time, the U.S. government had an interest in keeping everything about UFOs quiet. They'd often bury and discredit evidence, and one of their most vocal critics on this issue was James McDonald. Mr. Greenwood claimed that about 12 months after the incident, officials from another government had begged him to speak about the incident. He also said that the U.S. President Lyndon B. Johnson had set up an inquiry into UFOs, and he was sending officials out to meet Mr. Greenwood. In 1967, James McDonald actually was visiting Melbourne, and his official purpose there was to research cloud physics. But he also studied UFOs on the side, and he became well known for his UFO research. So when he got some free time in Melbourne, he went to see Mr. Greenwood. And Mr. Greenwood was working as a science teacher at Haileybury College at the time. During the interview, Mr. Greenwood shared his recollection of the incident. There is a recording of this conversation, but it can only be heard physically at the University of Arizona's archives. But during these interviews, Mr. Greenwood clarified that Frank, the headmaster, was the one trying to shut down the UFO story, not the Air Force. In fact, he said that the Air Force came 3 days after the incident. He also does not mention being threatened in any way by the government or the Royal Australian Air Force, despite James McDonald asking leading questions about an Air Force cover-up. He made a comment to James implying that Frank called him a drunkard during the school assembly. It's only in 2008 that Mr. Greenwood first mentions the Royal Australian Air Force men showing up at his door. At a congressional hearing where James testified that he believed that high-altitude aircrafts could damage the ozone layer and cause skin cancer, he was correct in saying this, but after he said this, a congressman took a cheap shot at him. He said that James believed in UFOs and little green men, which this severely damaged his professional reputation. And he actually later died by suicide in 1971. So that just goes to show, especially in this day and age, it was totally different. I mean, UFOs have become very widely accepted, and governments has even come out and accepted their existence. But back then, it was this very like taboo thing. Like, you believe in UFOs and little green men, like,
and you're whack as fuck,
right? And if you were somebody with a reputation or high education, things like that, or had a position of power in some way, if you came out and said anything in support of UFOs, you could, people would take shots at you. So
plus, I feel like a lot of times people who aren't really aware of UFOs use the whole term of like little green men. If you believe in aliens and you 100% believe in these little green men, like it's either black or white. Right. And in reality, like it's so much more complex than that. And we don't even know. Maybe there are no such thing as quote unquote little green men.
Yeah. I mean, maybe these beings aren't even anything physical that we can describe. Like they're.
Yeah, or they look like us.
Right. Yeah. Or they look like us.
Or they look like us, and the little green men is just the fantasy part of it.
Right.
That,
maybe
everybody's held on to. But many of the students who witnessed the incident still believe that the event was covered up by the government. One of the only pieces of documented eyewitness testimony outside of the news reports from that time is a report made by Joy Tai soon after the incident. Joy filled out the report for the Victorian Flying Saucer Research Society. And in 2010, a documentary filmmaker contacted Channel 9 News to see if they still had a copy of their 1966 interview with Joy Tai. This interview apparently never aired, but they confirmed that they had records of the film reel. But when the filmmaker went to check out the reel itself, he discovered it was missing, of course. 9 News claimed that the film reel had been removed from their archives and not returned. That is fishy. That is weird. That this random interview was somebody came looking for it and took it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just a weather balloon. So
right.
So why?
Yeah. The former Westall witnesses still talk about the incident today, but many of them are upset about the lack of official information on the incident. They want to discover some of the files to get closure, and I don't blame them. You'd want to know what other people know, and so you can kind of validate what you saw that day.
Yeah.
Over the years, they've also held meetups and reunions to catch up and discuss the event. Many of the witnesses post in a Facebook group about the incident, and this group was created by Shane Ryan, who's one of the most prominent Westall researchers. Shane was a big part of the 2010 documentary Westall 66. Many witnesses can still remember what they saw that day very clearly. Here's some witnesses actually drawing what they saw.
All these years later, the students draw what they witnessed. They claim one landed in a park, then took off.
I could feel a heat and hear this buzzing sound.
But the fact that the memory is still so vivid that after all these years later, they're able to detail out everything in a sketch of what they saw that day from 66.
Yeah, why would you still be hanging on to it if it was all just a giant lie?
Yeah. Or you just saw something perfectly ordinary.
Yeah.
Doesn't make a lot of sense.
Balloon.
Yeah. I don't know about you, but I am absolutely terrible at keeping track of all the subscriptions that I have subscribed to. Well, those days are no more now thanks to Rocket Money, which was formerly known as Truebill. I was actually using Truebill back when it was Truebill, and now it's become Rocket Money, and it's become even better. So many people have subscriptions that they've forgotten about, and 80% of those people don't even remember that they were subscribed in the first place. Maybe it's an unused Amazon Prime account or a Hulu account that never gets streamed. This app is absolutely amazing at tracking all of your expenses, but even easier when it comes to looking at what subscriptions you have, as well as helping you cancel those subscriptions, which is really, really nice. And if there's a subscription that you find through the app that you no longer want, all you got to do is hit cancel and it will go and cancel the subscription for you. Rocket Money can even find subscriptions you didn't know you were paying for. And you may even find out that you've been double charged for a subscription. Nothing's worse than that. So help get your finances in order, keep track of your expenses, and get those subscriptions under control. Get rid of those useless subscriptions with Rocket Money now. Go to rocketmoney.com/milehigher. Seriously, it could save you hundreds per year. That's rocketmoney.com/milehigher. Cancel your unnecessary subscriptions right now at rocketmoney.com/milehigher. In 2013, they created a UFO-themed memorial playground, which was built near the Grange, where the students first saw the UFO. A former teacher at Westall named Hazel Edwards actually attended the park's opening ceremony, and later on, she actually told a Westall researcher about an interesting interaction she had with one of her former students at the opening. Hazel had always maintained that there was no UFO sighting at Westall that day. She said that the story is fiction or a case of mistaken identity. She also believed that the witness numbers were highly inflated by sort of a repressed memory exercise. Hazel claimed that at the opening, one of her former students asked her not to share her doubts about the sighting. The unnamed student allegedly told her, quote unquote, "It's my only chance to be famous, and you're not going to take that away from me."
Okay, well,
why
how
does
do we
that
even know
sound
that
like
happened?
a bunch of bullshit to me? That sounds like somebody who is highly skeptical of something would make up.
Yeah. Convenient.
That, of course, oh yeah, I just want to be famous from this.
Famous.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's no fame to be gained.
Go down in history.
Yeah.
I was going to
Go
say,
down in
what
history.
is
There's nothing to be
Stupid.
famous about. Yeah. Hazel said that two other teachers who were also at Westall during the incident agree with her. She's been interviewed by multiple media outlets and filmmakers, but she says they usually cut her comments after she tells them she doesn't think the object was a UFO.
Which I don't believe that for a second.
Mm-hmm.
Why would they cut? If anything, they're going to cut out the comments of you believing that there's a UFO.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
that makes no
very
sense.
rarely are skeptics, silenced.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
Some teachers, students, and other staff have since passed away, and the former Westall headmaster, Frank Sambleby, died in 1986, so we can't hear his perspective today.
Be interesting to hear his.
Yeah. I mean,
Has he been?
I don't really want to
swayed?
hear
who
him.
gives a shit, honestly?
I don't know. It just
Sounds like a
like to think
closed-minded.
that your mind would expand a little bit by 2022, but maybe not.
Yeah, maybe not. Another big part of the Westall UFO theory is the idea that the whole incident was covered up, and this is where things start to get a little murky. The initial report in the Dandenong Journal said that one teacher and several students saw the object, but over the years the number has grown from 200 to even over 300, which just might be explained by a psychological phenomenon known as the bandwagon effect. High schoolers are still kids and they're very conscious about their image, and the event created quite a stir. So nobody wanted to be one of the kids who didn't or couldn't see the UFO. And therefore, kids like to make up stuff and
All
try
of
to fit
them?
in and be like, yeah, I'm like, maybe a few, but I don't know if you could go from, to all of them.
Yeah.
But then again, the short report from The Age published the day after the event said that hundreds of kids witnessed the object. And again, the headmaster called a school-wide special assembly after this sighting. And this would be very odd for an event that only a dozen or so people in the school witness. Why would they do that? Why not just pull those 12 kids as opposed to the whole school? And like, come on now.
Yeah.
So
definitely.
it's very possible that it was closer to 200 plus. It might be true that some of the students decided to join in on the story, but many of these students grew up and still insist they saw what they saw even decades later. The fact that teacher Andrew Greenwood came forward to corroborate the sighting may also boost their credibility.
I like to think about how the differences between this incident and aerial school. Because one, aerial school, all the teachers were like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, no one believed the kids.
Yeah, that's true.
Whereas, this is an incident where there's a handful of teachers who seem to have, experienced the same thing that the students did. But also, aerial school, that was a elementary school. So they were really young. But these students are a lot older here. So it just makes me think, because I think a lot of people are like, oh, they're kids. They have fun imaginations. That was like one of the main arguments for aerial school. And like, okay, maybe. But here, like we were talking about, they're a lot older and like, not that they don't have imaginations, but naturally younger kids have more of a creative imagination than people who are in high school.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, some people would argue that older kids
lie more. Or
yeah, maybe they would have more of a reason to lie versus the younger children. But I don't know. What do you think about the fact that both of these happened at schools? Do you think there's a reason they're landing near the schools?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I mean,
about that.
we did talk about this during Ariel too, that, you know, maybe
threat levels
they're trying
down.
to reach the youth. Well, yeah, threat levels down too. That's a good point. And maybe that there's a large group of them at once. But also, I think they are trying to reach our youth. In this case, we don't really have a direct example of that. But in Ariel's school, remember the kids were getting visions when they were experiencing all this of...
Yeah, they were like getting telepathy of the aliens basically sending them messages like, save our Earth.
Yes. Yeah, we need to change the way that we treat our planet and our environment if we're going to have hope of survival was the underlying message.
Maybe they were there to abduct.
Maybe, but I doubt it personally.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that maybe they're trying to make contact with us to hopefully save our planet or make an impact on us. And they think that
the old geezers are not worth spending time on.
Yeah.
Go to
or
the kids.
They're threatening.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's kind of the same idea with crop circles. It's like, what's the purpose of the crop circles? Well, is there a deeper meaning to them?
Is there a message?
Is there something that they want to, is it a subtle way of letting us know that they're there in a peaceful way that people won't freak out and get scared of? Nobody's scared of crop circles, right? I guess,
right.
Depending on if you've seen the movie Signs, maybe you might think different, but most people are like, that's beautiful. That's artwork. That's something, that we should take pictures of and study and things like that versus, but I think it's dropping hints, you know what I mean?
Right.
And that's why they're there. They're there to make their presence known, and hopefully over time, more and more people will come to accept their existence. But at the same token, it's also possible there's a more nefarious reason for it, but I won't get into that right now. But moving forward, there have been many allegations that the story was silenced, witnesses were intimidated, it's very clear, and that they were told to keep their mouth shut or else. The Dandenong Journal said that they were not permitted to interview the students after April 14th. Andrew Greenwood has claimed that the headmaster was so scared of the object that he refused to come outside until it was gone. He said that when the Royal Australian Air Force tried to contact the headmaster, he told them to quote-unquote go and jump in a lake. But Frank had an explanation for that. He told the news media to go away because the school had been getting so many calls and visits that the students were becoming distracted. So this seems like somewhat of a believable explanation. A bunch of teenagers would probably way rather talk to a bunch of reporters and cameras than sit in class. And due to the buzz the story caused, reporters kept calling and showing up, which greatly disrupted the school days. And it wasn't just journalists who kept showing up. The Air Force and UFO enthusiasts were coming too. On April 9th, the Air Force came to Westall with some of these UFO researchers to study the supposed landing site. But apparently nothing was found because the incident wasn't documented, and clearly this landing site was destroyed. After all, Frank himself thought the whole sighting was a fluke anyway, and he was a very authoritarian, by-the-book type of guy. So he might have let the government officials or the Air Force do what they wanted at first since they were authority figures. But even that became too annoying or distracting after a few days. Plus, the newspapers in the area reported on the incident widely. Interviews with students like Marilyn Smith ran in the papers, as did an interview with teacher Andrew Greenwood. Joy Ty said that her interview aired on TV that day, and plus more witnesses have continued to tell their stories over the years. If there was a cover-up, then there probably would have been some consequences from the government or whoever was trying to silence the story. Andrew said that his job was threatened, but he happily gave his story to James McDonald a year later, and he didn't lose his teaching job. As for the burnt landing site, there's another possible explanation for this. There are no records of the government or military ever burning the site, but the farmer that owned the land claimed that he was the one who burned it, which maybe somebody tipped him off to burn that. He said that he burned the land because he was tired of all these unwelcome visitors trampling all over his property, so he burned the spot or destroyed it to discourage other potential visitors.
That's a load of shit. Come on.
Yeah.
That's going to make people even more curious about it, I think. Right?
Yeah. If it's not a big deal, what's there to hide? Why are you so worried about destroying it? This doesn't make any sense.
Super fucking weird. People, the holiday season is here, and with it comes gift giving, lots of great food, and of course, dreaded holiday portraits. There's nothing worse than thinking that you look good in your holiday pictures, and then you see them later on and you have lipstick in your teeth, or your hair's out of place, or you have a big old zit. Well, some of those things you can't control, and that's the truth. But with Apostrophe, they can help you feel more confident in your own skin and get your skin looking right before the holidays. Apostrophe's goal is to help you feel confident in your own skin. Whether you're dealing with breakouts, signs of aging, acne scarring, Apostrophe will help you love the skin that you're in. And I can really speak to it for myself. I have loved using Apostrophe. It's just so easy. My skin has improved so much since I started using it and following their treatment plan. I'm using both the topical and an oral, and it has just made a huge difference, especially after, going through pregnancy and postpartum. I had a lot of hormonal acne going on, and it's just in such a better place. I'm really happy with it. Apostrophe is an online platform that connects you with an expert dermatology team to get customized acne treatments for your unique skin. Through Apostrophe, you get access to oral and topical medications that use clinically proven ingredients to help you clear acne. Simply fill out their online consultation about your skin goals and medical history, then snap a few selfies, and a board-certified dermatologist will create your initial customized treatment plan. And Apostrophe offers access to prescription treatments for all types of acne, from hormonal acne to facial acne, even back knee, chest knee, and butt acne. You can truly treat your breakouts from head to toe. And we have a special deal for our audience. Apostrophe is offering your first visit for only $5 at apostrophe.com/milehigher when you use our code milehigher. That's a savings of $15, you guys. This code is only available to our listeners. So get started at apostrophe.com/milehigher and click Get Started, then use our code milehigher at sign up, and you'll get your first visit for only $5. And thank you to Apostrophe for sponsoring today's episode. You're probably wondering what happened to Tanya, the girl who passed out after allegedly seeing the UFO. Well, she's actually alive and well, and she's spoken about what happened that day at Westall. Tanya explained that she and her mom had moved from Slovenia to Australia 3 years before the incident. They lived with an Austrian couple her mother worked with and the couple's 2 boys. Tanya said that on April 6th, she was the first one to see the UFO while they were doing PE on the Oval. She described the craft as a metallic silver with a flat saucer-like bottom and a dome-shaped top. The saucer moved quickly and erratically. It was as if it blinked off in one part of the sky and blinked on again in another, which definitely reminds me of a lot of UFO footage we have seen, potential UFO footage that has just been, recorded by random people. When she saw the UFO, she ran inside and started shrieking about flying saucers. Tanya doesn't remember if she was alone or if she went inside any classrooms to spread the news. She observed a chemistry teacher, Barbara Robbins, taking a camera from the office and snapping photos of the incident. However, Tanya revealed that she hadn't actually seen the craft at the landing site. By the time she got there, it was gone. And all she saw was a very large, round, burnt, or scorched area of flattened grass. Tanya also noted that she rushed inside soon after she saw the first UFO. So she thinks this might be why some of the students saw 3 UFOs and she only saw 1. Also, Tanya does not remember how she returned to school. She also doesn't remember anything about an ambulance or going to the hospital. She can't say for sure if it isn't true because she doesn't recall it. She said at that age, she was prone to dizziness spells and fainting. So given the fact that she had been running around and everyone was very excited, she could have fainted, gone to the hospital, and been discharged quickly after they realized that she was okay. Tanya returned to school for at least a few days after the incident. And she said the next day that students at the school were still talking about the UFO, of course, and they mentioned seeing army men at the Grange that day. But Tanya hadn't seen any men there. The headmaster was very angry with Tanya for leaving the school grounds without permission. A day or 2 after the incident, Tanya said that she thought 2 groups of men had visited the school, a pair of Australian men and a pair of American men. Then at one point, Tanya was called into a conference room where the 2 American men in dark suits interviewed her. and they grilled her about the incident. But afterwards, they made her feel very special. They thanked her for telling them what she had saw. They asked her not to tell anyone about it, and they really emphasized that she couldn't tell a single person. They implied that the government was working on something secret and that students weren't supposed to know about it or see it. And when the men asked her to keep the secret, she felt very important, like, she was in on something big. So Tanya didn't tell anybody. Not her mother, not her friends, nobody. None of the teachers discussed the incident with her either. And at some point, Tanya and her mother moved away to a different Melbourne suburb south of Westall. But this wasn't something out of the ordinary. She explained that her mother found a better job opportunity and living space, so that's why they had moved. Tanya couldn't explain the interactions that Jackie had when she knocked on her door, but she said it's possible that they had already moved by that time, or there could have been a language barrier issue between the school kids and the Austrian family that was living there. After the sighting, Tanya said that she put the whole thing into shutdown mode for many years, so her memories of the event are a bit fuzzy. She only started thinking about the incident again after people began to contact her asking about it. And with the recent developments in the UFO community and, all the sightings there have been, Tanya decided to share her story in 2021. Now that it is a lot more accepted, I think people are more willing to listen. So she said that the object couldn't have been a weather balloon or some government secret project they were flying on a trial basis. She doesn't think the object was anything that could have been produced on Earth. Now, there are many questions about this incident that still have not been answered. For example, what happened to the 9 News interview reel? What happened to Barbara Robbins' camera? Nobody seems to know. And the mystery of the Westall UFO continues to persist nearly 6 decades after the incident. And many witnesses believe that the mystery will never be solved.
Which it won't, because it's clearly covered up, and the information that likely will lead us into the direction that we believe was that this is something unidentified that we don't know the origin of, has been completely covered up by the government. But
lots of missing details.
But just to run through some alternate theories that are out there. One theory is that what the children saw that day was just a group of planes doing a training exercise through the military or something like that. So there is actually an airport fairly close to the school and only 4.5 kilometers behind the Grange called the Moorabbin Airport. It's a small airport, but it's pretty busy. And, there's tons of takeoffs there. But the students even said in interviews that they're next to this airport, so they see all sorts of planes and things like that all the time. And they know for a fact that what they saw that day was in no way, shape, or form some type of familiar object, let alone an airplane.
Yeah, actually, it's the 3rd busiest airport in the Southern Hemisphere by number of takeoffs, which makes me think this is like even proving even further that it wasn't a plane because of the fact that it's so busy.
They would see it
all the time. They would think nothing of it.
Which, people that go further down this theory say, oh, it could have been, military exercise, and they were using these sock-looking things called drogues. Have you ever been to an air show before? You see this stuff, and there's no way I would confuse this type of thing with a flying saucer. There's no way I would look up in the sky and first thing I say when I see training exercise happening with military craft, no matter if there's similar shaped objects involved with it, it'd be like, that's a flying saucer.
Yeah.
There's just no way. That theory just really doesn't add up to me. I don't think there's a whole lot that makes sense for that other than the school is relatively close to an airport and there were 5 planes that buzz this thing, but doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Which leads us to the theory that this was a high altitude balloon that was seen that day. Now, during this time period, high altitude balloons were being used to monitor radiation levels, and they were doing all sorts of testing. From 1960 to 1969, the US and Australian governments launched a joint research program into atmospheric radiation testing, and so there was a lot of these balloons that were sent up into the atmosphere. And like we heard earlier in the video clip, some of the balloons can, and I don't even know if this was a capability back in the 60s, but the balloons nowadays you can keep in a certain area. But a lot of times with the balloons that they launched during the 60s is that the balloons would just go where the wind would take them. So they'd launch it, hundreds of miles away, and it could end up, it would just go where it would go. So it's possible that a balloon could have been seen by the children. In fact, there was a balloon that was launched the day before, but it was in an area 354 miles away. It's called Balloon Flight 292. Possible that they saw a weather balloon, sure, but let's look at some clips here of weather balloons. And I just don't think there's any way all of these people could be confused about what they saw. And also, these weather balloons aren't landing on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when they do come down,
right.
If it was a weather balloon that came down, that crashed, they do carry kind of explosives in there to detach the different devices that they carry up into the stratosphere and things like that. So they do have a way to potentially explode. It could be dangerous, something like that. So that's the thought is, well, maybe this was a down weather balloon that they were worried could explode and hurt the children. And therefore, that's why they rushed to the scene and covered this up. And it could have been this big disaster. But it really just doesn't add up, because what they actually witnessed was an object that turned 45 degrees and shot off into the sky.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Weather balloons
Like,
don't turn on a 45-degree angle and shot, you know, and they're made out of latex.
Yeah.
It's like latex.
It's like offensive to accuse people of getting them confused. I mean, it's so obviously not.
And oftentimes it does. And sometimes people do get confused, though, by weather balloons that they see in the sky. And then they say, oh, it's a UFO. And then it turns out.
Yeah, in some situations. But in this case.
But when that happens, usually whoever launched the weather balloon claims that, you know, that's our weather balloon.
Yeah.
Or our high altitude balloon.
And their descriptions of it are very different when it actually does line up with a weather balloon. It's not darting. It's not.
Right.
So, you know, some of the other characteristics that these people are describing are so different.
So this is a clip of a high altitude balloon from afar. Like if you're on the ground looking up at it, this is what it would look like. So you're just on the ground, you're seeing this little thing up in the sky. Okay, it's just sitting up there. Do you see it darting? Is it rotating? Is it doing anything? Just sitting up there. Most of the times UFOs that are spotted are actually moving and doing something. And this, you know, weather balloons are going up. They're not going sideways, upside down, back to the ground. They're going one way, and that's up until they pop and everything comes down. That's what this next clip shows.
Today, the space tourism company Worldview confirmed via Twitter that the balloon was in fact theirs and was launched all the way from Tucson, Arizona, and could be seen by people all across Southwest Florida. Experts say it was likely some sort of malfunction that caused it to lose altitude, which is why it could be seen from the ground here in Florida.
It's right up there, Gary, that little white spot.
A tiny transparent speck in the sky yesterday afternoon was enough to catch the eyes of people all across Southwest Florida.
Well, kind of a cool thing, really. Makes us all look up, and kind of a fun thing to see.
But this was no
high pressure system, low pressure systems. They're measuring carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. They're measuring temperature, things like that. Yeah.
It's called a stratolite balloon, launched all the way from Arizona.
So
it uses helium to climb to 55,000 feet, the stratosphere, right on the edge of space. The company that made it, called Worldview, is a space tourism
We've talked
company.
about these guys before.
It launched last week to take data for NOAA.
It's just hovering there.
So why did we see it? I asked Todd Sherman with the Calusa Nature Center and Planetarium.
Floating. It's not.
It started to lose helium, which is why it was so low in the atmosphere. It shouldn't have been that low. It should have been much higher up.
And even though no one was aboard this time, it's because of flights like these that
I
someone
can't wait for that. Who's going with me?
I'll go. You are not
Reporting
going.
in Lee County, Alex Howard.
Yeah, if it's
NBC
safe,
2.
why not?
You would do it?
Hell yeah.
You would do it, Janelle?
If I come back, hell yeah.
Which they're going to
Well, I
make sure
guess,
it's
yeah, you
safe.
can
If it was
back,
safe, I
but-
wouldn't go with I would be the first one to volunteer.
That's what I'm saying.
But
like-
I would definitely go. Sorry, I would definitely like sign up after it's been going for a few years and
That's like the
everything's
number one
successful.
item on my bucket list is I want to see the Earth from space.
Yeah. No, I do get that. I just nowadays
I think
I'm
that'd
like
be the most
afraid of everything.
profound image you could possibly see as
it's
a human
expensive as
being.
fuck though. But maybe
Yeah.
like I don't know, 30 years from now it'll be like on Groupon.
Buy one,
Maybe.
get one free.
Yeah, exactly.
Buy one trip to space,
Dude,
get a second one
that's
for free.
gonna be our next holiday party.
Hell yeah. Maybe in a couple years from now.
That'd be so lit.
Taking a whole mile higher crew to space, bitch.
I'm just
Sick.
when I'm old and I'm decrepit and near my last breath, I'm just gonna say, hook me up to one of those balloons and send me up.
What the fuck?
Yeah, I'm sure our kids are gonna love that.
Well, the kids can say bye, Dad.
Bye, Daddy.
Bye, Dad. And they can watch me take the weather balloon, and then Once it disappears, they know.
The weather balloon pops, though.
That'd be a shitty ending. And then crashing down.
Dad comes back down.
Oh no.
Oh man. Hopefully he can get me out of the Earth's atmosphere though, so that I can just drift off into space and my body can forever just be floating and frozen in space.
Okay.
Until I collide with an asteroid into a million pieces. So from those videos though, I mean, based on descriptions, what they saw, what they're drawing, nothing matches up with a balloon.
No.
If you ask me.
No, I agree.
And there would have been other evidence of a balloon at the actual scene, at the landing site. There wasn't. So I'm sorry, but I don't think it was a weather balloon.
Yeah.
I really don't. And that's all the theories there are. It was some type of experimental military aircraft that was doing training exercises that decided to do a little pit stop by the children's playground and let the children play. Come running at it. No way in hell they're doing that.
No.
There's a reason why Area 51 exists. There's a reason why you don't think in Australia, in the great outback, that's where they're doing that shit. They're not doing it in Melbourne. They're not doing it in the middle of one of the largest cities in Australia. Hell no.
Right.
Not a balloon. This was something extraordinary that they saw that day. Was it alien? Was it something from another planet, potentially? Or was it potentially secret technology that it may not even been Australian in nature? It could have been something the United States government had back engineered. It could have been something that we created.
Yeah, that's true.
Because these craft have the ability to control gravity. It pulls energy from the space-time around it, and it is able to traverse great distances like it's nothing. So it's very possible that this was something, originated from somewhere else on this planet. It's some type of back engineered technology, but based on descriptions, what it was, based on what Bob Lazar saw, this is completely alien. There's nothing about this that, even to this day, think about all the technology that we know about, that the government has come out and said that they have. Nothing even remotely looks like this. It doesn't operate like this, doesn't fly like that.
Yeah.
We don't have the ability to maneuver in the way that these craft do. So just goes down as another sighting that can't be explained, and we will never know what it is until one day the truth is revealed. And is it a national security threat? Is that why they're keeping it under wraps? What's the reason? Or is it just something that we have no control over, and they're just, whatever intelligence is piloting these things is just going about it in a very strange way, dropping little nuggets of information and sightings. It's just interesting that the correlation between all the events is so strong.
I know.
There's just so many aspects
we
to
see just
all
like
of them.
these same things coming up whenever we talk about UFOs, honestly, or crop circles or anything alien related.
It's all tied together. So that's the Westall UFO incident.
Yeah, that is it. We want to know what you guys think, of course, about this one, especially our Australian friends, which
Down
I know
under.
we have a ton of you guys. So I want to hear your thoughts on this one for sure.
And
or if
please
there's things that
explain
you've
to me the appeal of the meat pies. I don't get it.
While you're at it.
The meat pies, man, that was the one thing I could not get.
I feel like you'd be into the
I
meat
love
pies,
meat
Josh.
pies,
Yeah,
but
I
I
was
did
gonna say.
not like this meat pie.
You didn't try it.
I didn't like the Australian beef either.
Did you try it?
The Australian beef was, I don't know what y'all feeding your cows over there.
Ooh,
but
don't be rude.
I'm sorry though, American beef is
We're used to
superior.
McDonald's here.
I don't remember you trying the meat pie. You tried it?
Yeah, we tried a meat pie.
I didn't.
It was on one of our excursions we did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yes, you're right. I do remember now. Oh, yeah. That
It's
was
like
not good.
for Americans, it's like a pot pie, but it's got like ground beef.
And
in
I
it.
hate
It's
pot
really
pie too. Just like pie and meat.
Chicken
are just
pot
not
pie
a
is
thing.
delicious.
No, I hate chicken pot pie.
Chicken pot pie is where it's at.
All right. Well, anyway.
Anyways, let us know your thoughts on the Westall UFO incident. Do you believe that it was extraterrestrials that were visiting the children that day? Were they there to entertain,
Or was it something else?
abduct? Maybe, a lot of people believe that aliens are here. Their purpose is to use our DNA to better themselves.
Or give us a message. That's what I lean towards.
Yeah, but it's like, can you make the message a little clearer? Because people aren't getting the message. So
that's true.
Can we step it up a few? I'm still waiting for them to make an appearance, and I ain't got all day. Okay, I only got so many more years left on this earth, and if I don't see one of you land or fly by me, I'm going to die a very sad man.
Well, given the fact that time's probably moving a lot slower for us, probably won't.
Thanks for crushing my dreams.
You're welcome. And on that note, we will wrap it up. We hope you guys are having a great day and that you enjoyed this episode and found it as interesting as we did. We will be back next week, but until then,
keep taking your mind to my heart.
Yeah, you took it out of my mouth. There you go.